The morning sun hadn't fully risen yet, but a pale strip of light pushed through the stained windows of Cole's butcher shop, cutting across the cold tile floor like a tired sigh. It was Monday, delivery day, and as always, Samuel Price arrived first. He stepped out of his truck, rubbing his eyes, still half asleep, and thinking more about the black coffee waiting for him at home than anything inside the shop. The key turned in the lock with a metallic click. Samuel nudged the heavy door open with his shoulder, letting out a long yawn as he stepped inside. The shop smelled like it always did, raw meat, bleach, sawdust, but today something in the air felt wrong. It wasn't anything he could put his finger on, just a heaviness, a stillness. "Adrian, you in here?" he called out, expecting to hear the familiar voice of his boss, Adrian Cole, grumbling from the back office. But the shop stayed quiet. Too quiet. Samuel shrugged to himself. Adrian had been unreliable lately, and that was putting it nicely. Stress, debt, pressure from home, it all weighed on a man. Samuel had chalked it up to life, hitting his friend harder than he could swing back. Still, it wasn't like Adrian to completely disappear. He walked toward the back, boots echoing through the empty store. As he approached the industrial freezer, a massive steel beast Adrian had financed 2 years earlier, Samuel slowed. Something wasn't right. Normally, the freezer hummed non-stop, a deep, vibrating growl you could feel in your bones the moment you got within 10 feet of it. But now, silence. A silence so absolute it made the small hairs on the back of Samuel's neck stand up. "What the hell?" he muttered, stepping closer. He placed his broad hand against the metal door. It should have been cold, ice cold, but instead it felt warm. Warm enough that his stomach dropped in an instant. If the freezer was busted, thousands of dollars worth of meat would be ruined. Adrian would lose it. The shop was already hanging on by a thread. This kind of blow could destroy them. Cursing under his breath, Samuel gripped the handle and tugged hard. The heavy door resisted for half a second before swinging open with a long, hollow scrape. And then Samuel froze. The blood drained from his face. His knees almost buckled, because lying between toppled boxes of frozen beef and collapsed stacks of plastic-wrapped pork was a woman. Her skin had turned a bluish purple, lips cracked, wrists rubbed raw where rope had dug deep into them. Her hair was stuck to her cheek with frost, and her chest rose and fell so faintly he thought at first she was gone. Then he recognized her. Melissa? Oh my God, Melissa! Panic surged through him. He stumbled backward, letting out a strangled shout that bounced off the metal walls. She looked lifeless, frozen, but when he leaned closer, her eyelashes fluttered. Barely. She was alive, but just barely. Samuel yanked out his phone with trembling hands and dialed 911 so fast he almost dropped it. His voice cracked as he shouted the address. Begged them to hurry, begged them not to waste a second. Within minutes, the shop flooded with flashing lights, radio static, officers ducking under yellow tape. Paramedics lifted Melissa out of the freezer, her limp body wrapped in blankets, her skin so cold it hurt to touch. The sirens faded as they rushed her to the hospital, leaving behind an eerie quiet that felt like the aftershock of a nightmare. Standing near the freezer, notebook open, pen already moving, was Detective Ryan Hale, tall, sharp-eyed, with a jaw that always seemed locked in determination. He listened to the crime scene tech describe the condition of the freezer. It looks like it stopped working 3, maybe 4 days ago. If it hadn't, she wouldn't have survived. Ryan Hale glanced back at the open freezer door, his brows knitting together. The rope marks on Melissa's wrists, the position of her body, the disabled freezer. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a mistake. This was a murder attempt. And the one man who should have been here today, the one man whose wife had just been found at death's door, was nowhere to be found. "Where's Adrian Cole?" Hale asked an officer. "Missing. Phone off. No one's seen him since Wednesday." Ryan Hale closed his notebook slowly. His voice was calm, but there was a weight behind it. "Then find him. Now." Outside, Samuel stood with his cigarette shaking between his fingers, staring at the shop like he didn't recognize it anymore. Hale approached him, lowering his voice. "You've worked here 4 years, right?" Samuel nodded, swiping a shaky hand across his eyes. "And Melissa? Anyone who'd want to hurt her?" "No. Samuel whispered. No way. She's the kindest person I know. Everybody loves her. Did Adrian seem different lately? Samuel hesitated. Stressed. Really stressed. And, they've been together since high school. Adrian loves her. I don't know what's going on. But Hale did. The pieces were already forming a shape in his mind. A dark, unmistakable shape. A missing husband. A nearly dead wife. A freezer that mysteriously failed at just the right time. And as he watched the ambulance disappear down the street, Detective Hale made a silent promise to the woman who had somehow survived 5 days inside a steel tomb. Whoever did this to her, whether it was Adrian Cole or someone close to him, he would find them, and he would make sure they never escaped justice. Detective Ryan Hale had worked dozens of violent crimes, but something about this one clung to him like a cold shadow. A woman found trussed up inside a freezer, barely clinging to life. A husband nowhere to be found. A business on the edge of collapse. It didn't feel random. It felt deliberate, calculated. And as he stood inside the dim butcher shop, the smell of metal and frost still lingering in the air, Hale could already sense that the truth would be darker than anyone wanted to believe. The first official report landed on his desk within the hour. Adrian Cole, 35, owner of Cole's Butcher Shop. Last seen 5 days ago, on Wednesday evening. Coincidentally, the same day Melissa disappeared, and the same day the freezer likely stopped working. His phone had been off since then. His truck hadn't been moved. No neighbor saw him come home. No co-workers had heard from him. To Ryan Hale, that wasn't just a red flag. It was a burning billboard. Back at the shop, he questioned Samuel again, this time with more focus. When exactly did you last see Adrian? Hale asked, flipping open his notebook. Wednesday night, Samuel replied. He said he was closing early, maybe heading to see Melissa's mom out in Philly. Didn't seem unusual at the time. Hale nodded slowly. Did Melissa mention any trip? Samuel looked confused. No, she was supposed to work the next morning. She wouldn't just leave town. Exactly. Another red flag. The forensic team was still combing through the back area of the shop, photographing every trace of rope fiber, every shifted meat box, every scuff on the freezer floor. One of the techs approached Hale with an update. We checked the freezer's internal system, she said. It didn't break on its own. Someone tampered with it. Looks like it stopped running about 24 to 36 hours after she was first put inside. Hale frowned. So she was meant to freeze to death, but someone interfered later? That's one possibility, the tech replied. He didn't like that. It hinted at hesitation or remorse from someone. But then a uniformed officer stepped in with another emerging thread. Detective, neighbors say Adrian's been stressed for weeks. They heard arguments. Some mentioned money trouble. Money trouble. It always came down to money. Later that afternoon, Hale drove to the hospital to check on Melissa's progress. Doctors said the hypothermia had pushed her body to the brink. She wouldn't have survived another 6 hours. She drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling fragments of sentences, but nothing coherent yet. Hale watched her through the glass, his jaw tightening. Whoever did this wanted her gone, cleanly, quietly, without a trace. Back at the precinct, Lieutenant Karen Brooks was waiting for him. What do we have so far? She asked, arms crossed, her tone sharp but controlled. Hale laid out the pieces one by one. Melissa was attacked and restrained. The freezer was deliberately sabotaged after she had already been placed inside. Adrian had vanished without a word. No signs of forced entry. Whoever locked her and had keys. Financial strain on the shop had intensified over the past 3 months. Brooks raised an eyebrow. And the husband is missing. He's the only person who fits all the variables, Hale answered. But that's sabotage if he wanted her dead. Why interfere later? Brooks questioned. That's the part that doesn't fit, Hale admitted. But everything else points straight at him. While Hale was wrestling with his internal doubts, financial records finally came in, and they sent a chill up his spine. The Coles were drowning financially. Equipment loans overdue, credit cards maxed out, mortgage behind, business revenue plummeting. And more disturbingly, Adrian had taken out a $100,000 life insurance policy on Melissa 3 years earlier. A requirement of their mortgage, yes, but Hale had learned long ago that a legitimate policy could turn into a motive when someone was desperate enough. And Adrian wasn't just desperate. He was cornered. Within an hour, the case cracked further. A junior officer walked briskly into the bullpen, holding a new file. "Detective Hale, we found this in the financial unit. Adrian Cole has debts with a known loan shark, Victor Viper Harris." Hale's face hardened. Viper Harris wasn't your standard bookie. He was aggressive, unpredictable, and ruthless when collecting. Enough to scare a man into doing something stupid, something unforgivable. He flipped through the file. Adrian owed $20,000. Payment long overdue. "Jesus," Hale muttered. He was in deep. Brooks leaned in. "So, what's your working theory? Husband kills wife for insurance money? Pays off Harris, shuts down the failing shop, disappears." "It fits," Hale said, "but something about it still feels wrong." "Wrong how?" Brooks asked. He didn't run far. If he planned this, why vanish in such a sloppy way? No getaway car. No fake identity. No cash withdrawals large enough to suggest a long-term escape. And the sabotage. I can't shake the feeling that he changed his mind. Brooks gave him a long look. Whether he changed his mind or not, he still put her in there. Hale didn't argue. She was right. That evening, surveillance teams pulled camera footage from businesses surrounding the butcher shop. One frame stood out. Wednesday night, at 6 p.m., Adrian locked the shop's front door and walked away with a duffel bag in hand. 2 hours later, a hooded figure, similar in height and build, returned through the back alley and slipped into the rear door. The footage was grainy, but the body language, it looked like Adrian. Either he came back to finish the job, Hale murmured, or he came back because he regretted it. But regret didn't erase what he'd already done. The next morning, Lieutenant Brooks walked into Hale's office with an update that would push the investigation in a new direction. "Ryan," she said, handing him a printed report, "we found Adrian's car, abandoned at the Baltimore bus station. It's been there since Wednesday." Hale straightened. "So he ran." "Oh, he ran," Brooks said. "The only question is, what exactly was he running from? His debts? His wife's attempted murder? Or himself?" Hale grabbed his coat. "Either way," he said quietly, "we find him next." When Melissa Cole finally opened her eyes, it was like surfacing from the bottom of a dark ocean. Her body felt heavy, her chest tight, her breath shallow. The steady beep of a heart monitor echoed somewhere to her left. The lights were too bright, the blanket too warm, and her skin, still cold in places, felt foreign, as if it no longer belonged to her. A soft voice cut through the haze. "Melissa? Can you hear me?" It was Dr. Lawson, kind-eyed and calm, lowering his voice as if afraid a loud sound might shatter her. She tried to speak, but only a dry exhale came out. Her lips cracked painfully. "Easy," he said gently, placing an ice chip against her lips. "You've been through something severe. Your body needs time." Melissa blinked slowly, trying to piece together anything. A memory, a moment, a face. But everything was foggy, fractured, like broken glass scattered in her mind. Then she heard footsteps, heavy ones, purposeful. Detective Ryan Hale stepped into view, hands in his pockets, face composed, but eyes weighing every detail. He had the look of someone who'd seen too many tragedies to be easily shocked. Yet Melissa could see it. He was fighting to understand her story before she could even tell it. "Mrs. Cole," he said softly, "I'm Detective Hale. I know this is difficult, but I need to ask you a few questions. Only what you're able to answer." Melissa swallowed, her throat painfully raw. What happened?" Hale pulled a chair beside her bed. "You were found inside the industrial freezer at your husband's shop." A tremor ran through her fingers. "You'd been there for days," he continued. "We're lucky you're alive." Lucky? She wasn't sure that word fit. She felt like a ghost, not a survivor. He paused, giving her time to process. "Do you remember how you ended up there?" Her eyelids fluttered, her breathing shallow. She tried to dive into her memories, but a thick fog blocked her way. Everything inside her head was blurred, like a dream slipping away the moment she reached for it. "Cold," she whispered. "I remember cold. Do you remember who put you in there?" Hale asked. Melissa blinked several times, her eyes flickering with confusion. "Adrian, where's Adrian?" The detective didn't answer the question directly. "We're trying to locate your husband. When was the last time you saw him?" She closed her eyes again, searching. Wednesday. A shift at the hospital. Kesha laughing about a patient. A cup of stale break room coffee. Then her phone ringing. Adrian, she whispered. He called me. Told me to come by the shop after work. Did he say why? He sounded off. She frowned, as if trying to hold on to the details before they slipped again. Nervous. Rushed. I thought he needed help with something. Do you remember arriving at the shop? Another pause. A flicker behind her eyes. A dim shape in her memory. I went through the back door. He was there. Alone. Papers everywhere. He hid them when I walked in. Hale's eyes sharpened slightly. Did you see what kind of papers? No. He didn't want me to. Then suddenly a spark, small, faint, but there. And earlier that week, Melissa whispered. Someone came to see him. Who? A man. Tall. Well-dressed. Said he was an old friend. Adrian looked terrified after talking to him. Hale exchanged a glance with Dr. Lawson. This detail mattered. It could be Viper Harris. Or Damon Wilson. Both were trouble. Do you remember what happened next? Hale asked gently. Melissa's breathing hitched. She clutched the blanket, knuckles whitening. It's blurry, she said, almost apologetically. I remember being in the back room. Adrian asked me to help check inventory in the freezer. I didn't think anything of it. Her voice trembled. I walked in first. Her chest rose faster, breaths growing shallow. And then something hit me. Hale leaned forward slightly, his voice steady. You were struck? Yes. Tears gathered at the corners of her eyes. From behind. I didn't even see it coming. What's the last thing you remember before you blacked out? Melissa's lips parted. Her face twisted. Fear, hurt, disbelief mixing into something raw. His face, she whispered. Adrian's face. He looked empty. Hale didn't interrupt. He said, she swallowed hard. I'm sorry. There's no other way. The room felt colder suddenly. Melissa's tears finally broke loose. Detective, Adrian wouldn't hurt me. Not like that. Something's wrong. Something must be wrong. Hale wanted to tell her the truth, that the evidence was stacking up fast and all of it pointed directly at Adrian. But he also knew trauma rewrote memory, softened edges, bent reality to protect the heart. Instead, he chose honesty without cruelty. Melissa, he said gently, your husband is missing. We're doing everything we can to find him. But right now, your memories are crucial. Take your time. Let them come when they're ready. She nodded shakily, tears rolling down her temples. As Hale stepped out into the hallway, Lieutenant Brooks approached. How is she? She asked. She remembers just enough to break your heart, Hale replied quietly. And just enough to make Adrian look very, very guilty. But then he added something that even Brooks didn't expect. Still, there's a piece missing. Something we're not seeing yet. Because if Adrian wanted her dead, why come back 2 hours later? Why sabotage the freezer afterward? Guilt? Panic? Or something darker? Whatever the reason, Hale knew one thing. Melissa had begun remembering, and the truth was coming. Piece by fractured, painful piece. Detective Ryan Hale sat alone in the small conference room. Paperwork spread across the table. Bank statements, loan documents, text message logs, screenshots of betting accounts. The deeper he dug, the more the story twisted into something uglier than he expected. Whatever image Melissa still held of Adrian, the loving husband, the high school sweetheart, the man who held her hand through nursing school, that Adrian had been gone for a long time, replaced by someone desperate, cornered, and dangerously unpredictable. And now Hale needed to understand exactly why. The first major crack appeared in the Coles financial records. On paper, Adrian was a small business owner with steady income, but the documents told a very different truth. 3 maxed-out credit cards, a business loan months past due, a mortgage teetering on default, and worst of all, bank transfers to online betting platforms. Big ones. Adrian wasn't just struggling, he was drowning. Hale called in Melissa's best friend, Tara Nguyen, who worked the same hospital shift. Tara sat stiffly in the metal chair across from him, twisting a tissue in her hands. Detective, Melissa didn't know about any of this, did she? Tara asked with hopeful eyes, like she was begging him to say yes. Hale shook his head. No, it appears Adrian hid their finances from her. Tara swallowed hard. She would have helped him. She always tried to fix everything. Hale's voice softened. Did she ever mention him gambling? Once, Tara admitted. She caught him betting on football games a year ago. He promised he stopped. He didn't stop. The betting accounts showed increasingly frantic wagers. $200, then $1,500, then a wild $7,000 bet the week before Melissa disappeared. A man doesn't throw money like that unless he's trying to climb out of a hole by digging deeper. But it got worse. A file slid across Hale's desk later that afternoon confirmed his growing suspicion. Adrian had borrowed $20,000 from Victor Viper Harris, a man Hale knew all too well. Harris wasn't just a loan shark. He was a predator who specialized in exploiting desperate men. He'd send collectors to doorstep after only a few missed payments, not to negotiate but to intimidate. And when intimidation didn't work, he escalated. Hale visited Harris at his bar, a grimy hole in the wall where trouble lived. Harris leaned against the counter, thick gold rings tapping as he drummed his fingers. Adrian, Harris chuckled when Hale asked. Yeah, he owes me money, but I didn't lay a finger on his wife. Bad for business killing spouses. Makes people stop borrowing. You threatened him, Hale pressed. I encouraged timely payments, Harris corrected with a smug grin. But no, if Adrian's woman ended up in a freezer, that wasn't me. Did he ever mention a plan involving insurance? Harris's smile froze for a fraction of a second. Detective, he drawled, people under pressure say stupid things. He said something about money coming in soon. Didn't ask questions. Don't care. As long as I get paid. And there it was, the motive Hale feared but expected. When he returned to the precinct, Lieutenant Brooks was waiting with a thick folder. You're going to want to see this, she said. Inside was the life insurance policy on Melissa, $100,000, taken out 3 years earlier. At first glance, it looked routine, a requirement tied to their mortgage refinancing. But Hale noticed something subtle, something easy to overlook. 1 month before Melissa went into that freezer, Adrian increased the coverage. Brooks crossed her arms. Tell me that's a coincidence. It's not, Hale said quietly. The pieces slid into place with an awful clarity. A failing business, crushing debt, dangerous creditors, a wife with an insurance policy worth more than everything Adrian owned combined. And yet, there was still one thing Hale couldn't shake. The freezer's sabotage. If Adrian planned this meticulously, why come back? Was it panic? Was it guilt? Or was something else, something they were missing, at play? He needed answers, fast. That night, Hale drove to the Coles' small brick house. The living room was eerily tidy. Melissa's nurse scrubs folded neatly on the couch, where she must have left them before going to the shop that night. Sitting on the dining table were unpaid bills and a stack of unopened letters, most with warning labels from creditors. Behind them sat a framed wedding photo, Melissa laughing, Adrian holding her waist, both glowing with the certainty that the future was theirs. But on the fridge, held by a childish magnet shaped like a cow, was the final blow. A notice of overdraft from their bank. The date? 3 days before Melissa was attacked. Adrian hadn't been slipping. He had already fallen. When Hale returned to the station, the financial analyst had one more detail. There's something big, the analyst said. The morning after Melissa went missing, Adrian checked the insurance policy online. Hale stopped moving. He checked the payout claim process, the analyst added. Hale exhaled slowly, rage simmering beneath his calm exterior. This wasn't a moment of panic. This wasn't a mistake. This was a man with a plan. And yet, he still came back. Brooks approached from behind. You think he changed his mind? Hale stared at the board covered in photos and notes. The freezer door, the rope marks on Melissa's wrists, the grainy footage of a figure returning to the shop. I think Adrian Cole tried to kill his wife, he said. But somewhere in the middle, something cracked. And that crack, whatever it was the reason Melissa was still alive. The next step was clear. To solve the case, they needed to follow Adrian's fear and Adrian's guilt, both of which were leading them straight into deeper, darker territory. Detective Ryan Hale had seen countless crime scenes staged to look like something they weren't. Burglaries disguised as break-ins, assaults made to resemble accidents. But this case didn't just smell wrong. It felt wrong. Every thread he pulled tightened another knot instead of unraveling anything. And the biggest knot yet was forming around a single disturbing fact. Someone else had been inside Cole's butcher shop the night Melissa was attacked. It started with the security audit. Hale had assumed Adrian shut off the cameras before disappearing, but the tech team discovered something far stranger. The system hadn't been disabled manually. Someone had physically unplugged the main power feed to the DVR box around 6:40 p.m. on Wednesday night, just minutes after Melissa arrived at the shop. That meant two things. The person knew where the security system was. The timing wasn't random, it was intentional. Whoever cut the cameras wanted Melissa in the dark. Hale stared at the connector cables in the evidence bag. Clean cut. No hesitation. Someone who knew their way around electronics, or at least knew exactly what they were doing. But then came the second, even more unnerving detail. A surveillance camera from a liquor store across the street had captured a figure near Cole's butcher shop around 8:12 p.m., 2 hours after Adrian locked up for the night. The footage was grainy, distorted by bad lighting, but the silhouette had the same build, same posture, same walk. It looked like Adrian, but not quite. The man moved with hesitation, pausing at the back door as if unsure whether to go in. He looked over his shoulder repeatedly, tugged at the hood of his sweatshirt, then disappeared into the alley behind the store. Brooks crossed her arms as she and Hale watched the footage for the 5th time. "You think that's him?" she asked quietly. "Looks like him," Hale said. "But people who try to kill their spouse don't usually come back 2 hours later. They run, unless he was making sure she was dead." Hale shook his head. "No, his body language is wrong. He's scared, jumpier than someone who's committed. This looks like someone torn between two choices." Brooks didn't argue, but she didn't agree either. "And if it isn't him," Hale said, "that means someone else has Adrian's keys. Someone close. Someone who knows his routines." The name came to him instantly. Damon Wilson. Melissa had mentioned him in her fragmented memories, a childhood friend of Adrian's who had resurfaced out of nowhere. A man with a criminal record for fraud, petty theft, and breaking and entering. A man whose life had always orbited trouble. Hale's jaw tightened. "What if Damon was involved?" he murmured. Brooks raised an eyebrow. "You think he helped kill Melissa?" "Either helped or took advantage of Adrian's desperation." Melissa said Adrian hid papers the moment she walked in. That could have been loan documents, gambling stubs, debt collectors, but also could have been something Damon gave him. The investigation into Damon's whereabouts started immediately. His last known address was a rundown duplex on the east side of the city. When Hale and a patrol unit arrived, the door hung open, the apartment trashed. But it wasn't a chaotic addict's mess. No broken glass, no random destruction. It was a search, someone looking for something specific. Probably Adrian, or someone who wanted something Adrian had. Hale's eyes swept the scene until something caught his attention on the counter, a stack of mail. Among bills and junk letters was a folded note. 3 words. "He owes me." Brooks exhaled sharply. Viper Harris? Could be, Hale said. Could also be Damon, or someone else entirely. But the feeling in his gut told him this was deeper than they thought. Back at the precinct, the lab sent another update. The freezer malfunction was caused by intentional sabotage. Someone had removed a thermostat component, not broken it, not kicked it loose, removed it. And the timestamps aligned with that mysterious figure seen entering the shop later that night. Whoever came back, Hale said, didn't come to ensure she died. They came to give her a chance to live. Brooks blinked. "You think Adrian came back to save her?" "That's the question," Hale replied. "If it was him, then he didn't want to go through with it. If it wasn't him, someone else, someone with access, made that choice. And why would anyone else save her?" Brooks asked, unless they didn't know she was in there, or they didn't know the plan, or they had their own reasons. It was a chilling possibility. The person who attacked Melissa might not be the same person who sabotaged the freezer, meaning there could be 2 players in the shadows, one who wanted her dead and one who didn't. That night, Hale brought Samuel Price back to the station for a more thorough interview. He showed him the footage frame by frame. "Is that Adrian?" Samuel leaned forward, squinting. "Looks like him, kind of. He walks like Adrian, but the shoulders look different. Damon's got that same walk when he's trying to act tough. Damon was around the shop recently? Samuel nodded. Came by twice last week. Adrian seemed pissed, but didn't say why. Hale sat back, letting the pieces rearrange themselves in his mind. A desperate husband. A criminal friend suddenly back in his life. A loan shark whose threats were escalating. A sabotaged security system. A hooded figure returning after the attack. Someone else had stepped into this story. Someone dangerous. Someone unpredictable. And until they found Adrian, alive or dead, they wouldn't know which shadow they were really chasing. When Hale finally left the precinct that night, he paused beside the evidence board, eyes fixed on the picture of the freezer door. Somebody else was there, he whispered. Somebody we haven't seen yet. The case had started with a freezer, but now it was turning into something bigger. A maze of fear, betrayal, and hidden alliances. And the shadow standing between Adrian and Melissa was only getting darker. The manhunt for Adrian Cole officially escalated to a multi-state operation just 48 hours after Melissa regained consciousness. By then, every detective in Baltimore knew the case wasn't simply a domestic dispute gone wrong. It had grown teeth. There was a missing husband, a nearly dead wife, a sabotaged freezer, a possible accomplice lurking in the dark, and a trail of financial desperation dripping behind every clue. Detective Ryan Hale didn't like loose ends, and Adrian was the biggest one of his career. The first real break came from an unexpected place, a Greyhound bus station clerk. Hale and Lieutenant Karen Brooks were combing through surveillance footage from the Baltimore bus depot when the clerk jogged over holding a printed manifest. "You said you were looking for a guy in his 30s, medium build, beard?" he asked. "This man bought a ticket Wednesday night, one way to Miami." The name on the purchase order wasn't Adrian's. It wasn't even close. But the payment method caught Hale's eye. Cash, and the amount was exactly the price Adrian would have paid at that hour. Hale tapped the ticket, pulled the security feeds for Gate 12. The clerk nodded, and within minutes, the grainy footage flickered onto the screen. Hale leaned forward. There he was, Adrian, hood up, beard scruff thicker, duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He kept his head down, face half hidden, but the posture, the hurried movements, the constant glances over his shoulder, it was unmistakable. Brooks crossed her arms. He ran south. Why Miami? Hale didn't hesitate. Cheap motels, easy bus routes, cash-only options everywhere. And it's a major escape corridor. From Miami, you can vanish to the Caribbean, Mexico, or South America with the right contacts. Adrian wasn't stupid. He was desperate. Within hours, Hale coordinated with Miami police and the U.S. Marshal Service. An alert was put out. Bus stations, motels, pawn shops, every place a panicked man might try to hide. And it worked. 2 days later, a Miami motel clerk called in. "Yeah, we had a guy who looks like your suspect check-in Wednesday morning. Paid cash. Left quick. The room was still untouched. Housekeeping hadn't gotten to it yet." Hale and Brooks flew down immediately. The motel was small and sun-faded, wedged between a pawn shop and an abandoned diner. A sad little courtyard pool sat half-empty, filled with leaves and a single deflated floatie. The clerk pointed toward room 9. That one. He was shaking like a leaf when he checked in. Hale entered the room slowly, gun drawn, but Adrian wasn't there. What he left behind told a different story. On the nightstand, an empty bottle of cheap whiskey, a crumpled bus ticket, a local map with several routes circled, and a motel notepad filled with frantic scribbles. But the biggest find was wedged under the pillow. His wedding ring. Brooks picked it up carefully with gloves. He took it off. Hale stared at the ring, jaw tightening. He wasn't planning on coming back. But that wasn't all. The motel manager brought them additional footage. Adrian leaving the property shortly before dawn, headed north, not south. Brooks frowned. He doubled back? Why? Because he's scared, Hale said. He realized Miami isn't a place to disappear. Too many cops. Too much attention. He panicked and ran again, this time heading inland. Their next clue came from a bus driver in Georgia. He remembered a nervous passenger who matched Adrian's description getting off near Atlanta. He kept looking out the window, the driver said, jumping at shadows. That lined up perfectly. Adrian's run wasn't the clean escape of a hardened criminal. It was the frantic sprint of a man who didn't plan past step one and was unraveling with every mile. In Atlanta, Hale and Brooks visited a second motel, the kind that rented by the hour, not the night. And there, in a small room that smelled of sweat and fear, they found a breakthrough that changed everything. A laptop, still open, still powered on, and on the screen was an email draft. Unsaved, unsent. It was addressed to Melissa. Brooks read it out loud, her voice slow, heavy. "I'm sorry. I didn't know what I was doing. I thought I couldn't get out of the hole I dug. I thought the money would fix everything. But when I saw you lying there, I couldn't let you die. I went back. I tore out the thermostat. I don't expect forgiveness. I didn't mean to hurt you. I lost myself." Hale exhaled through his teeth. So he came back. He sabotaged the freezer to keep her alive. Which means, Brooks added, he didn't disappear after the attack. He was watching, hovering, changing his mind. But the last line of the email chilled them both. Someone else knows. Someone else was there. And I'm running from him too. Hale's eyes snapped up. There it is, he said. The shadow we've been missing. Damon? Viper Harris? Another unknown player? Hale didn't know, but the chase had just taken a sharp turn. That night, a convenience store clerk near the Atlanta Greyhound station reported seeing a frantic man matching Adrian's description buying a prepaid phone and food. He left toward the bus terminal. The next morning, marshals found him, slumped on a bench, gripping a duffel bag, eyes bloodshot, exhausted beyond reason. No fight, no resistance, just a broken man who finally stopped running. Detective Hale flew out to bring him back personally. When Adrian looked up and saw him, tears spilled instantly. "I'm done," he whispered. "I can't hide anymore." As Hale placed the cuffs on his wrists, he said only one thing. "You're going to tell me everything. Every detail. Every name." Because now Hale knew the truth. This wasn't just a case of a husband trying to kill his wife. This was a twisted web, and Adrian wasn't the only spider in it. When Adrian Cole arrived back in Baltimore under federal escort, the sky was a dull sheet of gray, one of those heavy, quiet mornings when the whole city felt like it was holding its breath. The transport van pulled up behind the precinct. Cameras were already waiting out front, but the marshals had anticipated that, slipping Adrian through the rear entrance where no reporters could swarm him. Detective Ryan Hale stood inside, hands in his pockets, watching as Adrian stepped out in cuffs, head bowed, posture completely defeated. This wasn't the same man in the happy wedding photos, or even the desperate man on the bus station cameras. This was someone who had been running not only from police, but from himself. When Adrian finally looked up, his eyes met Hale's. There was no anger, no defiance, just a hollow kind of relief. "It's over," Hale said quietly. Adrian nodded. "I know." He didn't fight as officers guided him into the interrogation room. Didn't request a lawyer. Didn't sit with swagger or attitude. He folded his hands, stared at them like he barely recognized them, and waited. Hale took a seat across from him, placing a thin case file between them. He didn't open it. Didn't need to. Everything Adrian could say, every detail, every motive, it all needed to come directly from him now. "Adrian," Hale began, voice low, steady. "I'm going to give you one chance to tell the truth. All of it. Not for me. Not for the court. But for the woman who almost died in that freezer." Adrian flinched at the word freezer. A visible shiver went through him. He opened his mouth once, closed it, swallowed hard, then finally whispered, "I love her. God, I loved her. But I still did this." And the confession spilled out. Not in one clean story. Not in smooth sentences. It came in broken pieces, like glass fragments he was trying to pick up with shaking hands. He spoke about the debts first. How they'd started small, sports betting, late-night online gambling. Just to catch up, he'd told himself. How 3 quick losses had snowballed into 10. How the loan sharks came next. How every lie he told Melissa made it easier to tell the next one. Then he talked about Viper Harris, the enforcer who threatened him, told him there'd be consequences for the both of you. How that single threat had burrowed into his chest like a ticking bomb. "I didn't plan it first," Adrian whispered. "But once the thought got in, I couldn't get it out." Hale watched him carefully, expression unreadable. Adrian's fingers tightened like he was trying to wring water from his own skin. That night, I called her to come to the shop. She didn't know anything. She was smiling when she walked in. His voice cracked. I couldn't look her in the eye. I told her to help me check inventory in the freezer. She trusted me. She trusted me with her life. He blinked hard, tears hanging on the edge. When she turned her back, I hit her. Not too hard. I didn't want blood, didn't want. I don't know what I was thinking. It wasn't me. It was, but it wasn't. It felt like I was watching myself from outside my body. Hale didn't interrupt, didn't soften, didn't offer comfort. This wasn't the moment for it. Adrian continued. I dragged her inside, tied her wrists, taped her mouth. I kept telling myself it would be fast. She'd fall asleep, go numb. The insurance payout would save everything. I could fix everything. He finally lifted his eyes to Hale's. But the moment I closed that door, I broke. I collapsed on the floor outside the freezer and threw up. I stayed there for almost an hour. I couldn't breathe. So he ran. He left the shop, left her in the cold, and tried to convince himself it was too late to undo it. But halfway home, Adrian said, shaking, I panicked. I turned back. I couldn't leave her like that. He went back through the alley entrance, unlocked the back door, stood in the dark pantry, staring at the freezer. It was still running, he whispered. I could hear the hum, and I knew if I opened that door, she'd be alive, and I'd go to prison for the rest of my life. So he made a choice. Not a heroic one, not a loving one, a coward's choice. I destroyed the thermostat, ripped the wiring out. I figured if the temperature rose, she might survive until someone opened the shop in the morning. Why not free her? Hale asked finally. Adrian shut his eyes. Because I didn't want to face her, he whispered. I didn't want to see what I'd done. I couldn't bear it. I'm not proud of that. I'm disgusted by it. Hale let the silence stretch. Then he slid a printed page across the table, the unsent email they'd found on the laptop. Adrian didn't touch it. He only stared. I wrote that the night before Atlanta, he said. I was going to send it. Then I got scared again. You kept running? Hale said. Yeah. Adrian breathed. I did. I kept running, even though I knew every mile was making me worse. For the final few minutes, Adrian spoke softly about Melissa, how she'd supported him, stood by him, believed in him, how he betrayed her in the worst way imaginable. I don't expect forgiveness, Adrian said finally. But if she ever hears my name again, I hope she hears it in a past tense. Because the person who did that to her, I don't want to be him anymore. Hale closed his notebook, stood up, and called for the 2 transport officers waiting outside. As they cuffed Adrian and led him toward holding, Hale said only one thing, not out of malice, but out of truth. You didn't lose yourself, Adrian. You chose yourself, and Melissa paid the price. Adrian's shoulders sagged. He didn't argue, didn't plead, didn't deny. He simply whispered as he stepped through the doorway. I know. And for the first time since the freezer door slammed shut, Adrian Cole wasn't running anymore. The afternoon in Baltimore was unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that settles after a long, violent storm, when every broken piece has finally stopped rolling and the world pauses to take a breath. Detective Ryan Hale sat in his office as a slant of golden light cut through the dusty window, landing across a stack of paperwork he'd been avoiding. It was the last of the Cole files, statements, autopsy photos, financial records, and the crime scene shots he had stared at too many times to still feel the chill. The case had officially closed more than 2 years ago. Adrian Cole was serving his 15-year sentence. And Melissa Cole, the woman who had survived 5 days in a freezer, had vanished from Baltimore right after the trial ended. Ryan thought of her sometimes. Not romantically, not longingly, just humanly. Like someone who had watched a person crawl out of the darkest chapter imaginable and hoped they somehow found a quieter life on the other side. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock. Detective Hale, a clerk, stepped in, holding a cream-colored envelope. This just came for you. Ryan raised an eyebrow. He rarely received personal mail. The envelope had no return address, just a simple line written neatly across the front. To Detective Hale. He took it, feeling a strange heaviness settle in his chest. He opened it slowly. Inside was a photograph and a folded note. The photograph showed a group of nurses standing in a brightly lit hospital hallway. Smiling faces, clean scrubs, hopeful eyes. And there, right in the center, was Melissa. But she looked different, stronger, more grounded, almost reborn. Her hair was shorter, her posture confident, her smile real in a way he had never seen back in Baltimore. Beneath the photo, written in gentle handwriting, was the name. Melissa Carter, Chicago Medical Center. She had changed her last name. She had changed her life. Ryan unfolded the note. The handwriting was familiar, steady, careful, still carrying pieces of someone who had once held on for dear life in the dark. Detective Hale, I thought you should know that my life has finally started again. Chicago is a cold city, but not the kind of cold that traps you like that freezer did. It's the kind that wakes you up, makes you breathe deeper, reminds you that being alive still matters. Ryan sat back, letting out a long breath. A warmth spread through his chest, relief mixed with something like gratitude. He continued reading. On my first day at work here, I looked in the mirror and said, Melissa Cole died in that freezer. But Melissa Carter is still alive. I still have scars, but they don't define me anymore. Ryan paused. For a moment, the chaotic world of the precinct faded. This letter, this little piece of hope, cut through all the dark cases he'd been drowning in. He kept reading. I don't know if Adrian ever tried to write to me. Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. Either way, I've chosen not to look back. Forgiveness isn't for him. Forgiveness is for me. Ryan felt that line settle deep in his chest. The letter continued. Thank you, Detective Hale, for believing me, even when I couldn't trust my own memories. If you ever find yourself in Chicago, coffee's on me. Not to talk about the past, but to remind ourselves that there's still a future for survivors. Warm regards, Melissa. Ryan folded the letter carefully, like something fragile and valuable. He slipped it back into the Cole file and closed the folder. For the first time, he didn't feel the need to keep that case open in his mind. As he stood to grab his coat, Lieutenant Karen Brooks stepped in. Tying up old cases again, she asked, catching the soft look on his face. Ryan smiled faintly. Yeah, and I think I can finally sleep a little better. Brooks arched a brow. She doing okay? Ryan looked out the window at the street below, where the sunset cast warm orange light over passing cars. She's alive, he said softly. Really alive. Brooks nodded. Good. That's all we can ask for in this line of work. The office fell quiet again. Ryan glanced once more at the photograph before placing it gently in a drawer, not as evidence, but as a reminder. A reminder that even in the coldest stories, even in the darkest places, someone can still find their way back into the light. Adrian Cole's case was over, but the story of Melissa Carter, a survivor who walked out of the ice and into her own future, was only just beginning.